Yes, how are we all? I hope all is well. My name is Sachin, and this is the Total Cricket Podcast, episode 24. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the first test between England and the West Indies, so let's get right into it. And I will begin with the team news. We saw Mark Stoneman, as expected, making his test debut for England, and also Chris Woakes was not quite match fit yet, so he missed out. Otherwise, as expected, for England. For the West Indies, we saw Kyle Hope make his test debut, and one little surprise was Miguel Cummins playing in place of Shannon Gabriel. Obviously, the West Indies felt that Shannon Gabriel, with his ongoing rhythm and fitness issues, would be a liability in this match. But now onto the match itself, and this was about as one-sided as it gets. We've just seen the Sri Lanka versus India Test series, and that theme of one-sidedness has continued. England winning by an innings and 209 runs inside 3 days. Wow. This was an absolute drubbing. Let's start with the recap though. England, they won the toss and on a fairly benign surface had no hesitation in batting first. And did they pile on the runs in this innings? It was an absolute onslaught. They got 514 for 8 declared, and the chief destroyers were Alistair Cook and Joe Root. Alistair Cook getting his 4th test double century. He got 243, an absolute marathon innings from Alistair Cook. He batted for a day and a half. Joe Root, he got 136, finally converting a 50 into a big one. And they also got some help from David Malan. He chipped in with his maiden test half century, 65 to be exact. But apart from that, there wasn't really any other contributions, but England didn't need any at the end of the day, and 514 certainly enough to really put West Indies out of the game straight away. The West Indies bowling, Kemar Roach definitely the pick of the bowlers. He took 2 wickets. Alzari Joseph, he went wicketless. 1 wicket apiece for Miguel Cummins and Jason Holder. Roston Chase, he got a 4 for, although they really were consolation wickets towards the end when England were looking for quick runs. Now onto the West Indies first innings, and they were absolutely rolled for 168 in just 47 overs. The only real resistance provided from Jermaine Blackwood, a counter-attacking 79 off 76 deliveries, but the rest really offered absolutely nothing for England. The wickets were shared around really, but the chief destroyers definitely Jimmy Anderson with 3 wickets and Stuart Broad with 2. Toby Rowland-Jones also chipped in with a couple, and Moeen Ali, he got 1. There were also 2 runouts. And then the West Indies were asked to follow on. It was a pretty obvious decision for England after they had a lead of 346 on the first innings and had only bowled for half a day in the first dig. So the West Indies really did even worse in the second innings, all out for 137 inside 46 overs. Wow. This was absolutely abysmal. No one got even a 50 for the West Indies. Craig Brathwaite was the top scorer with 50. But again, apart from him, absolutely nothing to talk about. The West Indies losing 19 wickets on day 3, incredibly, to crash to an innings defeat inside 3 days. In the second innings for England, again, James Anderson, Stuart Broad doing the damage. This time Jimmy Anderson got a couple and Stuart Broad got 3 for. Toby Rowland-Jones again picked up a couple. Ben Stokes got a wicket and Moeen Ali got a brace. So that was really it for the game. Ominous signs for the West Indies heading into the rest of the series. Now I will begin with the breakdown, and just a quick note on the whole day-night test aspect before I go into the teams. I think definitely the day-night test was a boost to this game, and certainly I feel it was the reason behind the 3 basically capacity crowds that we saw in this game. I feel that without this whole day-night test historical moment, the novelty of it, I don't think the crowd would have been particularly great, and I fear that in the coming 2 tests at Headingley and Lords, there will be a lot of empty seats, even in a country where Test cricket is as popular in as England, due to the fact that the West Indies simply have no appeal. No one wants to watch this West Indies team. So certainly the spectacle in this game was definitely elevated by the day-night test. But I will talk in more detail about day-night test cricket in general tomorrow in the podcast, so do be on the lookout for that. But now let's go into the analysis of the teams, and there's only really one place to start, and that is the West Indies, who really even surpassed my expectations in how much of a dismal performance they served up. I thought that they would at least give us something, but they didn't. And really, this was very difficult to watch as a cricket fan, this game. The West Indies being as poor as they were. I'll begin with the batting. The batting in general was simply not up to test standard. This pitch wasn't particularly lively, and yet the West Indies looked like they couldn't bat on it at all. Really, the exception being Jermaine Blackwood in the first innings. It was absolutely pathetic. They just had no answer. A lot of these players simply do not look like they are test players. They're not good enough to play at this level. And that's as simple as I can put it. Now, let's start with Craig Brathwaite, the most experienced batsman in the lineup. He got an absolute ripper from Jimmy Anderson in the first innings and he was dismissed for a duck. Did decently enough in the second innings. He got 40 before he was trapped by Moeen Ali. But the reality is, when Craig Brathwaite is one of your better batsmen, you're not a good team. Craig Brathwaite is a guy who he has a good temperament and he's very disciplined, which is very rare in the modern test batsman, but he's a limited player who doesn't have a real variety of strokes. He can't really dominate the bowlers. He's a guy that has to occupy the crease a long time to get his runs. And with him, he's really never going to put a lot of pressure on the bowlers. So really, it's always going to be difficult for him to score his runs. And Brathwaite, at the end of the day, averages 35 in Test cricket. He's a decent player, but he's really nowhere near elite. And that is the level that the West Indies are at. But Craig Brathwaite is certainly one of their better players. He hasn't been in form in the tour games. He didn't get runs. And again, now he has to deliver. Otherwise, the West Indies have no shot of competing if he can't. So definitely Craig Brathwaite needs to up his game. Kieran Powell, what was he doing in the first innings? A suicidal run. And then in the second innings, he just nicked off to Jimmy Anderson. Kieran Powell, he does have some good shots. I think he's got a nice cover drive in particular. But again, I don't think really he has really a watertight technique that you need as a test opener. And when you look at his record, he averages 26 in Test cricket. That really is not going to cut it, given the fact that he has played 25 tests now. That's a pretty decent sample size. And when you're averaging sub 30, I think it's fair to say you're not quite good enough. And ultimately, Kieran Powell, since his comeback, has not really delivered in any sense of the word. So where do West Indies go from here in terms of the opening slot? They have tried some other players. They've tried guys like Kirk Edwards. They've tried Leon Johnston. But the reality is, none of them are really quite good enough. So I think, unfortunately, they're sort of stuck with Kieran Powell, I guess, unless they try someone else. But it doesn't look like there is anyone else. Now, Kyle Hope, he made his test debut, and he did okay in the first innings, got 25 before he got a bit of a rip snorter from Jimmy Anderson, and then in the second innings, trapped plumb in front by Toby Rowland-Jones. But Kyle Hope, now, let's think about Kyle Hope now. This guy's 28 years old, making his test debut, and what's his resume? He had one first-class 100 prior to this tour. He has two now because he got one in a tour game for this tour. To get selected when you have only one first-class 100 in 34 first-class matches, and you're 28 years old, you're not really a young, talented player, that, more than anything, illustrates the dearth of quality in the West Indies setup, really. Kyle Hope, again, doesn't look like someone who's going to be a great test batsman. So, really, again, the West Indies just do not have a lot going for them. his brother, J-Hope, batting at 4. Now, he's probably one of the more talented players in this West Indies team, but he didn't score runs in this game. Clean bowled in the first innings by Toby Rowland-Jones, and then he sort of poked at one off Ben Stokes in the second innings. J-Hope has an average of 18 in Test cricket. He's played 11 tests, and he's your number 4. I know he's a talented player. He does have some nice shots. He averages over 40 in one-day cricket, which is where he's really done quite well. But in Test cricket, your number 4 averages under 20. Wow, with 150 to his name in 11 games. That's extraordinarily poor. And while I do think they should definitely persist with him because he's got talent and he is actually quite young, again, this is the dearth in quality that the West Indies are dealing with. He got a double hundred in first-class cricket, and then he was immediately put in the team. But one innings doesn't make you an amazing player. Again, this is the talent that the West Indies have at their disposal. Roston Chase has been their best Test batsman in the last year, since he debuted, really. He played 10 games coming into this one, and his average was 48. So it had been a great start to his Test career. He had 3 centuries. Those were against India and Pakistan. And he really looked like a guy who had some nice shots, good temperament, good technique about him. But even he looked completely out of his depth. In the first innings, particularly that duck off 11 balls, Jimmy Anderson toyed with him until he eventually chopped back onto his stumps. And then plumb in front by Stuart Broad. He did put up some resistance in the second innings, 24 of 47. That was one that kept a little bit low, nipped back in from Stuart Broad. That was a bit unlucky, I must say. Very difficult to keep a ball like that out. But again, I thought if you really look at the first innings, the way that he was found out by Jimmy Anderson was quite alarming, given that this guy has been your best batsman in the past year. Unfortunately, it's the running team. I've been banging on about it. The West Indies, simply the talent is just not at the required level. So that's it. Obviously, Roston Chase, they need to give him a really good run. I think he's still a good batsman, and he should improve. I expect him to make at least one decent contribution on this tour. Now, Jermaine Blackwood, he definitely had the best performance of the game for West Indies, a real spark amongst nothingness, to be honest, from the rest of the team. He got 79 in the first innings off 76. He's a very aggressive batsman. He only really knows one way, Jermaine Blackwood. And to be fair to Blackwood, I really don't understand why he was dropped for the recent Pakistan series. He hadn't been scoring a lot of runs, but then again, who had for the West Indies? He still was getting some reasonable contributions, but then he was just dropped. And for, of all people, Vishal Singh, who was completely clueless at the Test level, Jermaine Blackwood has a Test 100 against England, might I add, and he averages 32. That's pretty decent for a West Indies batsman batting at number 6. He's also a good slip fielder, Jermaine Blackwood. So I really don't know what they were doing dropping him, but they need to persist with him. But the issue with Blackwood is we really saw it in the second innings. He just came down and was stumped off Moeen Ali. His style, while it's really nice and he has all the shots, it borders on recklessness a bit too much. And that's really the biggest thing that has ailed him in his Test career is his temperament. He's not a guy who's willing to bide his time. Really in the mold of Niroshan Dikvella, they just don't seem to have any other gear. They don't have a patience to build an innings, really. Although admittedly, it worked really well in the first innings, but more often than not, you're going to look stupid playing some really, really over-the-top shot. So I think while Jermaine Blackwood, I like his intent, needs to sort of learn how to build that and play the percentages more. That's the bottom line. Play the percentages more. But definitely the West Indies have to keep with Jermaine Blackwood. Now, Shane Dowrich, he completely flopped in this one. He got just the 4 in the first innings, plumb in front to Toby Rowland-Jones, and in the second innings clean bowled by Stuart Broad for 5. Dowrich, now, when I look at Dowrich, he averages 25 in Test cricket so far. He looks like he can hold the bat, but his batting quality is more like a keeper from yesteryear's batting quality, really. There's not that sort of ability to score big runs, I feel, that a lot of other keepers in world cricket do possess nowadays. And his wicket-keeping itself is not that flashy. He has made a lot of errors throughout his career. So, really, with Dowrich, I'm not particularly sure if he's the answer for the West Indies. I look at Dinesh Ramdin, who has obviously been dropped for a while from the West Indies Test team. At the end of the day, Ramdin was a decent enough keeper, and yes, I do appreciate the fact that he averaged below 30 in Test cricket as well, but he got hundreds at the end of the day, and he's an experienced guy that might actually give a little bit of help to this team that is just lacking in experience and confidence so greatly. And I do also appreciate that Ramdin is the wrong side of 30. But is Dowridge the answer? I think if he continues to fail in this series, I think really questions have to be asked whether Ramdin comes back into the team for the next game. Sorry, not the next game, for the next series. So yes, that's it for the West Indies batting. The biggest thing for me that I take out from this game is that this batting lineup is not good enough to score runs at Test level. Is this team capable of scoring even 300? I really question that. In the last 25 tests the West Indies have played, they haven't scored 400 once. That is not good enough. Now, I will say that out of all the batsmen, only Kieran Powell has played Test cricket in the West Indies, sorry, not in the West Indies, in England before. So I understand that obviously there are going to be some growing pains involved in playing cricket in completely different conditions to what they get at home, where they play most of their cricket on slow, low surfaces. But really, this type of performance you cannot simply excuse just from that fact alone. There's obviously an issue with the quality of the players. Now, moving into the bowling, and I thought the West Indies bowling was definitely their strength coming into this game. But wow, it really did not live up to the hype. It was good to see Kemar Roach back. He was the pick of the bowlers, I thought, bowling with that real typical angle he gets into the right hander and across the left hander. And I think he really was the one who actually was able to build some kind of pressure and trouble the English batsmen. So it was really good to see Kemar Roach come back. Obviously, a little bit of experience coming back into this team can only help them, I feel. So I think they'll be looking to Kemar Roach as the man to really lead this attack throughout this series. Big expectations on his shoulders. Alzari Joseph, I feel, was overawed by the occasion. He's still 20 years old, young bowler who is reasonably talented, but I think that in this game he was really all over the place with his line and length, was not able to build any kind of pressure, and unfortunately was more of a liability for the West Indies. I look at Alzari Joseph, he physically has all the attributes, but I really hope he can perhaps develop maybe 5 kilometers extra pace. I feel like he could be a little bit quicker, and that would probably help him just push into the 135, 140 range. I think that would certainly help him a little bit. But first and foremost, he has to get his control right. Now, Miguel Cummings, now obviously interesting selection. He was not good. He got some early success trapping Tom Wesley in front, but it went quickly downhill from there. Miguel Cummings, he doesn't really have any pace about him. There's nothing about his bowling that makes me think that he's a viable Test bowler. And his career so far backs that up. He's played 6 tests and he's got 11 wickets. And he got 9 wickets in a game. So that means in the other 5 tests he's played, he's got 2 wickets. That is not an ideal start. And even in that game where he got 9 wickets, he got a 6-wicket haul in the second innings of that game against India, when India were really pushing from the get-go to score quick runs to try and force a result. So to me, Miguel Cummings, I honestly believe that the West Indies, I know Shannon Gabriel has had issues with his rhythm and fitness issues. He's had that throughout his career. But I think they need to just put him in. They've got nothing to lose. Even if Gabriel has a mare and bowls a lot of no balls and can't quite get it right, he's worth the risk, because the West Indies are so bad as it is, they can't really get much worse. And Gabriel, at his best, bowls quick, and he can really put the batsman on the back foot, and that is something that the West Indies simply weren't able to do. So I really think that they should be looking to bring in Shannon Gabriel for Miguel Cummings if he is fit in the next game. Miguel Cummings certainly not particularly impressive to me again. Jason Holder, he tried. He always tries, Jason Holder. I love his spirit. The fact that he plays in such a lousy team and has been thrust into the captaincy when he's still a developing player, completely, really not ideal in terms of his development, but he always gives it his best and he never complains. And I like that about Jason Holder. But to me, Jason Holder still, while he has come a long way since his career began, he's still a little bit of a bits and pieces cricketer. As a bowler, his real strong suit is his control and clogging up an end. But in this test, he wasn't quite able to do that. Admittedly, he didn't get a lot of help, but he wasn't. And then he's not the best wicket taker because of his lack of pace. The guy's 6'6" or 6'7". He's huge, but he doesn't have pace. He bowls 130 at best. And unfortunately, that means that he's really not as penetrative as he could be. If he had even 5 kilometers more on him, he could be a lot more dangerous. But I look at his batting as well. He's a decent batsman. He's got good shots, but he's not quite a top order batsman. He averages 29 in Test cricket. He does have a Test 100 and several 50s, but when I look at him, he still looks like a lower order batsman more than a real batsman who could hold his place on his batting alone. However, in this West Indies team, he could certainly keep his place as a batsman alone. Such is the lack of quality in the batting. But to me, Jason Holder, averaging 29 with the bat, 37 with the ball, still room for refinement. But I appreciate how difficult his circumstances. I like him a lot. I think he's got a lot of potential as a cricketer, and hopefully he can develop it. Obviously, being the captain of this team that is losing so heavily, there's not much experience for him to lead on. It's a very difficult task, and certainly it is affecting his output as a player. Now, on to Roston Chase's bowling. Really, he's not a very good bowler. That's the fact of the matter with Roston Chase. He took 4 wickets, but they were really all consolation wickets. Apart from David Malan, he did actually get him out legitimately, but the wickets certainly of Cook, Stokes and Moeen Ali were really consolation wickets when England were looking for quick runs before the declaration. He couldn't really stop the flow of runs. Roston Chase bowled only 2 maidens, went for over 4 and over. He's a part-time bowler at the end of the day, and I think definitely Devendra Bishu will certainly come into the reckoning for the next test. I also know that he is not someone to clog up an end, but certainly he can take wickets in Test cricket, Bishu. He has that in him. But I think it's going to be a question of whether the pitch is going to help him enough. But really, the West Indies Chase as a spinner doesn't really cut it. Craig Brathwaite also bowled a few overs, and he was reported, funnily enough, for having a suspect action. I don't think that's a particularly big blow to the West Indies, but certainly Craig Brathwaite does have a questionable action. So I kind of feel like he will be found to have an illegal action. But again, really makes no difference to the West Indies. Craig Brathwaite, certainly not a guy who's going to do a lot of bowling for them at all. But that concludes the bowling. Really, while there were little bursts of quality, on the whole, it was lacking discipline, and really there wasn't a lot of pushback in terms of there wasn't enough pace. It was a little bit military medium for the most part, I felt. There wasn't that express pace that you usually see from a West Indian fast bowler, and really that just made it all the more easier for Cook and Root to fill their boots. So certainly the West Indies, the bowling, they really need to get better at that. That's their only chance of competing, is to get the bowling right. So certainly they'll be thinking about a few personnel changes with Shannon Gabriel and Devendra Bishu coming into the equation. Now, just the West Indies as a whole, in terms of the fielding, the captaincy, everything, the West Indies were a complete mess. The fielding was absolutely atrocious. How many simple ground fielding balls were just missed? Simple balls just rolling across the grass, they just missed. Comically bad fielding. Jason Holder's captaincy was questionable as well. Why was Craig Brathwaite bowling with the new ball, with the second new ball? I don't understand. When you have 4 fast bowlers in the team, why do that? Why would you have a guy like Roston Chase bowling so many overs when he's not really a wicket threat? I don't get it. I appreciate that you don't want to run your fast bowlers into the ground, but Chase bowling that many overs, I really don't know why. If anything, they could have spread the load with him and Brathwaite. Brathwaite actually bowled 6 overs for 6 runs, so he was at least economical. But really, Jason Holder, I appreciate that He doesn't have a lot of resources to work with, but such a defensive mindset in his captaincy really doesn't help the team. And really, when I look at the West Indies, they did everything wrong. They're making basic errors. The bowlers are not putting the ball in the right areas. The fielders are making schoolboy errors. The captain is making bizarre tactical choices, and the batsmen are basically not putting a price on their wicket. The fundamentals of the game are not there. And as a test team, when that's the case, you are not a competitive team. And that's where we are at with the West Indies at the moment. It's going to be very difficult for them to really stop this momentum. This team is a losing team. There's very little experience in this team. I can see it continuing in this same vein for the next two tests. Jason Holder has really a nigh on impossible task in turning this around. But let's look at the West Indies, really the wider malaise that the West Indies are in. Now, when I look at this team and I think about where it used to be and how far it's fallen, I just feel sad as a cricket fan. Back in the 80s and the 90s, the West Indies were an incredible team to watch, an incredibly talented team, athletic team, just wow, showstoppers. But slowly but surely, since the mid 90s, they've got progressively worse, and now we're here with the West Indies, and it's not pretty. They're not a competitive test nation. That's the fact of the matter. And when I look at the West Indies, obviously the quality of the players that they have produced has slowly but surely gotten worse over time. And there are a few reasons for that. Obviously, there's just a simple natural cycle of things where you do get these golden generations. We see it with every country. And then you get some periods where there aren't really the players coming out. But I think that an issue that the West Indies face is certainly a talent drain to things like athletics and football. If you have a look at the teams back in the day, how athletically superior they were to everyone. Think about the best West Indian fast bowlers: Curtly Ambrose, Malcolm Marshall, Michael Holding, Courtney Walsh. The list goes on. I haven't even scratched the surface. Joel Garner. Really, it is just the athleticism of those West Indies bowlers back in the day was something to behold. They were so quick. They were so just superior to everyone else. But when you look at the West Indies bowlers now, they're really not as athletic. While they do have the height, when you look at a guy like Jason Holder particularly, they don't bowl quickly and they're not really athletes as such. Whereas back in the day, you saw how incredible they were, the West Indies, athletically, and it just meant that their bowling was relentlessly brilliant, quite frankly. The pace in the West Indian bowling is gone, and that is a huge, huge reason why they are so average nowadays. Now, obviously, the other thing is that as this talent has progressively gotten worse, we have seen the issues in the West Indian cricketing setup exposed. The poor infrastructure and the corrupt nature of the board has been exposed now that the players are not as talented. They can't get away with as much, the West Indies. And look, I'm looking at this team and thinking about all the other West Indies players that could be playing for them. I appreciate that Chris Gale is 37 years old. I appreciate that Marlon Samuels had a terrible streak of test batting until he was eventually dropped. I appreciate that Kieran Pollard has not played a test match. I appreciate that Andre Russell hasn't played a first-class match since 2014. I appreciate that Dwayne Bravo hasn't played a test since 2010. I appreciate that Sunil Narayan has not played a test since 2013. I appreciate that Jerome Taylor is 33 years old. But really, are those players going to do any worse than this crop? Absolutely not. They would be better, I believe. Think about what they would add. At least they would give a boost in confidence. They're big names. There's someone for the more talented youngsters like Shea Hope, Roston Chase, Jason Holder to look up to learn from. There's a little bit more of a winning mentality in the team, people who have actually won some games of cricket, and surely they would be better. Now, the other thing I do realize is that these players, a lot of them are the wrong side of 30. They're not youngsters, so this would really be a short-term thing. But tell me this, would you rather the West Indies continue in this vein, or would you rather see them be somewhat viable for a few years and the more talented of the youngsters at least be in a better environment that would surely help them improve much faster than they are at the moment. I think absolutely the latter. And bear in mind, this is not like it's that young a team. There are only two players in this current West Indies team who are under the age of 25, right? That to me alone blows my mind. Shea Hope and Alzari Joseph are the only guys that are under the age of 25 in this team. It's not like this is some young, talented team. Oh, in a few years they'll be really good. A lot of these players are just kind of meh, and they've just sort of been selected because there's no one better rather than the fact that they're actually good enough. So, really, that's even more of a reason to go with that alternative. Obviously, the biggest name that's missing is Darren Bravo. He's a guy who has been their best test batsman for a long time. He averages 50 away from home in test cricket at that number 3 spot. Of course, you'd have Darren Bravo in there ahead of Kyle Hope. And hopefully we do see him return in the next series, Darren Bravo. Obviously, there's that pending policy amendment, which would see West Indies players be able to play in the domestic 2020 leagues around the world and still represent the West Indies in Test cricket. That cannot come soon enough for the West Indies. I feel like they need to get back some players that have some experience. And then there's guys like Jerome Taylor who have made themselves available for Test selection and they haven't been picked. Are you telling me that Jerome Taylor is not better than Miguel Cummins or, let's say, another guy in the squad, Raymond Reifer? You got to be kidding me. Jerome Taylor has over 100 Test wickets. Why has he not been picked? He's made a comeback for the West Indies in 2020s recently, and he's looked quite good. I know he's 33, but come on. I just don't understand. The West Indies board continue to make baffling decisions with their selection, even though obviously there are these issues that they have to deal with. The biggest one being that these players, there are simply more lucrative opportunities playing in these domestic 2020 leagues than playing for the West Indies. The money is a big issue for the West Indies. It always has been a big issue. So clearly they're fighting a force that really they can't compete with. But you're not helping yourself when you're not picking players who are clearly better than the alternatives. I think what's quite interesting about this team is that 8 of them are from Barbados out of the 11. Where are the players from the other traditional strongholds of West Indian cricket like Jamaica, Trinidad, Antigua, Guyana? Where are those players for the West Indies? It baffles me. This selection committee is not helping itself. They really aren't. They need to be looking elsewhere because this current crop is simply not good enough. The West Indies are going to die if they already haven't as a team, if they continue to go with this crop of players. Obviously, some of them you can persist with, but a lot of them are never going to cut it at this level. Now, there's also one final thing I want to mention is that the West Indies, obviously, I talked about the money with the domestic 2020 leagues. Well, there's also the money with county cricket. Look at Chris Jordan. He's a guy who was born and raised in Barbados but moved to England and has been a fringe player for England, but obviously a regular on the county circuit. He would be making a lot more money than these players are playing for the West Indies. This is another potential issue. You get players leaving the West Indies to go to primarily England. There's also another guy on the domestic circuit called Jofra Archer, who's also a talented all-round cricketer, averages 30 with the bat and 23 with the ball in first-class cricket, who may actually get called up to England quite soon. Another guy who was born and raised in Barbados. West Indies are leeching these players. They're going to England. It's the money. That's such a big issue for the West Indies. And I really feel that when there's so few test countries to begin with, and when there's a country like the West Indies, who are such a key part of the cricketing tapestry, that the ICC should have stepped in long ago to help the West Indies and help them financially to really compete on the level. It's basically an absolute disgrace the way the ICC have gone about managing the game. It's a topic that I certainly will talk about in more detail in a future podcast, but really the amount of viable test teams is actually not growing, it's diminishing, and it's so sad to see the West Indies going the way that they are. But that is it for the West Indies from this game. It's going to be ugly this tour. I don't see any way back for them. it's going to be very difficult to watch as a cricket fan, certainly, the rest of this series. But moving on to England, and did we learn anything for England from this game? Absolutely not, in my opinion. At the end of the day, the usual suspects did the business. Alistair Cook, what a champion. We all know he's a world-class batsman. I really don't need to talk much about Alistair Cook. We know what he does. He's been doing it for the last decade. We know exactly what Alistair Cook is. He's a world-class opening batsman who has an excellent temperament. And to be able to score a double century, I don't care against who, it requires great discipline and application. So congrats to Alistair Cook on his 4th Test double century, his 31st Test century as well. Now, Mark Stoneman, definitely alarm bells must be ringing in the England camp. Mark Stoneman, he failed. He only got 8 clean bowled. Great delivery by Kemar Roach, it must be said. But certainly, any team that you want to pick to fill your boots against, you'd probably pick the West Indies. And he only lost 6 balls against them. Now, there's only 2 more tests left for him to really make an impression. And if he doesn't, then what do England do going into the Ashes? They're in a real pickle. Now, I said before the squad was named that I would have gone with Haseeb Hameed. And I still stand by that because I look at Haseeb Hameed. He's young, he's 20. He's had test experience against an elite test team in trying circumstances. He's shown an excellent temperament, an excellent technique, and a great application and patience while still having the shots. Yes, he's had a torrid time since then after returning from injury, didn't get runs for the England Lions, didn't get runs in the county championship, but in the last innings he played before that squad was named, he got a 70-odd not out for Lancashire. Timing is everything in selection. Surely that innings would have A, massively helped his confidence, and B, paved the way for him to come back into the England setup. I would have gone with him. I really would have. Because at the end of the day, Mark Stoneman is 30 years old, and while he's had a great season this season in the county championship, he averages under 35 in his whole career. To me, I don't know. I have big question marks. Obviously, we haven't seen enough of Stoneman to really gauge it, but these 2 next tests, huge for him, huge for England. Tom Wesley, he also failed, trapped plumb in front by Miguel Cummings. I can't believe that wasn't given out on the field. But nonetheless, Tom Wesley, again, showing that he's a little bit loose technically, playing across the line to that one. He's a talented stroke maker, but he's shown so far in his short test career that he does really not have the, I would say, the rigidness in his technique. I feel like he's a little bit too loose. And at the number 3 position, I don't think you can get away with that. Is he the answer at number 3? I really don't know. Big question marks, and ultimately England don't have much choice with this position. They've tried Gary Ballance and he's failed. Where do they go from here with that position? I don't know. Maybe they can have a reshuffle, bring back Alex Hales into the setup somehow, but it's a bit awkward when you can't get runs against the West Indies, really. Now, Joe Root. This was a big innings for Joe Root, the 11th consecutive test in which he has scored a 50. Remarkable consistency, but where have the hundreds been for Joe Root? It was a big thing for Joe Root to get 100 in this game. As always, very fluent with Joe Root. Beautiful strokes, as always. A real masterclass from him on that first day. And he brought up his 13th Test century. Really good from Joe Root. That's what he needs to do now. He needs to improve his conversion rate to become the best in the world. But so far, with the captaincy, his batting has not missed a beat. World-class player. He's going to be huge for England in the Ashes. Now, David Malan. He did okay in this test. He got his first 50 after a dismal start in the first 2 tests he played against South Africa, but I felt that he didn't really convince. He was a little bit shaky, and he got out to Roston Chase, poking at one and caught it slip. Now, to me, given how poor the West Indies are, you have to factor that in. Definitely, he's a decent batsman, but is he the answer? I think the jury is definitely still out. This was by no means really a career-defining innings, and he really missed a big chance to score a century. So I still feel there are question marks about this opening slot, the number 3 and the number 5 for England, and I feel like that's going to be the case going into the Ashes. I don't think it's possible for them to solve this conundrum heading into the Ashes, but what they are going to have to do is they're going to have to take a couple of spare batsmen on that tour, because really there are huge question marks for those positions, and definitely it's a continued weakness in the England batting lineup. I can't really say much about Ben Stokes, Johnny Bairstow and Moeen Ali's batting. They all came in when they were looking for quick runs. They all perished pretty quickly. But again, they're three crucial players. They're big all-rounders for England, and certainly they'll play a huge role if England are to do well in the Ashes. But as I said, really we can't take anything from their batting in this game. Now looking at the bowling for England, it was really clinical. Again, didn't learn much, unfortunately, about England. We know how good Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad are in England. Jimmy Anderson, with that wonderful wrist that he has, swinging the ball both ways, putting the ball on a coin. He was just incredible in this test. He took 5 for, toying with the England batsmen. Really, he's been doing this for a decade, so no surprises with Jimmy Anderson. Stuart Broad was excellent as well. He picked up 5 for, and he actually went past Ian Botham in terms of test wickets. He now has 384 test wickets. So congrats to Stuart Broad on that. Looking at Stuart Broad's bowling, I think it's quite interesting to see how over time he's lost his outswinger, and really now that in-swinger is his big threat, but also the cutters that he bowls. He bowls quite handy cutters. But again, he's still a class bowler. But certainly for Stuart Broad, that is something that he does need to look at if he's going to be at his best. They've actually talked about it quite a lot in commentary, and what they do say is that he's really basically not getting his fingers right behind the ball. He's falling away, and that's meaning that the ball is not swinging out, really. So I think if Stuart Broad can correct that, then he's going to be really difficult to play. But still, as it is, he's a fantastic bowler, and he has been for a decade. Toby Rowland-Jones continued to have a good start to his Test career. Again, with him, we know what we get, has good control, and nice, tall, upright action. He's able to get the ball to do a little bit off the surface, get some bounce with his height. He's certainly a handy bowler. But again, as I've talked about with this England bowling attack, obviously getting the West Indies out is really never going to be a difficult task for them. And I talked about this after the 4th test against South Africa. This fast bowling attack lacks pace. I think they need some pace, particularly when they go to Australia on pitches that are flatter, offer less assistance to the faster bowls. They need a bit of pace in their attack. So definitely that's something to look at for England. Ben Stokes didn't have to do much bowling in this game, although he did get a wicket in the second innings. And Moeen Ali likewise didn't have to do a lot of bowling, but he got 2 in the second innings. Nothing to add about their bowling again. We learned so little about England in this game, and I'm sure England are a little bit frustrated by that, to be honest, that they're really not being given a contest to allow them to really figure out some of the issues with their team. The same issues do remain, I feel. The batting, obviously those holes, and in the bowling, there's certainly a lack of pace in the fast bowling that really is never going to be exposed in English conditions. But given the fact that the Ashes are being played in Australia, that's something that will be an issue for them when they go down under. So certainly for England, really a super easy win for them, and nothing to talk about, in all honesty. Absolutely nothing with England. Just simply too good in these conditions for the West Indies. And now we move on to the second test. That will be at Headingley. So really, my thoughts on that test. I fear for the worst. I can't see it getting better for the West Indies. And for England, again, I think they must be pretty frustrated as well, as I said, by the fact that they really cannot refine anything about this team in this series, given the lack of quality in the opposition. So certainly, this is not going to be a particularly exciting test series. Really, it just does not appeal to anyone. And unfortunately for cricket, it's not a great thing when in a country like England, which is such a stronghold for test cricket, we're very likely to see poor crowds in the next few games due to the lack of competitiveness of the West Indies. It's not a good sign for cricket, and certainly that is the way things are heading, with more and more teams becoming really just completely out of their depth at the test level. But that is another topic for another day. That concludes this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can check it out. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. All those links can be found on the Twitter page. Do look out for another podcast I am releasing today. That is my review of the first ODI between Sri Lanka and India. But that is it for me today. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.